On this episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies, the planes of 9/11.
It's got massive implications.
What hits the towers at that point? Was it a remote-controlled plane? Was it a missile?
Somebody was theorizing that UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them today, aren't actually any kind of physical being, but they're holograms.
Is there any precedence for duplicate flight incidents?
It's like a big no-no from that happening.
Is it just somebody recording data incorrectly or some kind of human error? But to your point, this is all done automatically through computer systems. Some of these planes were so far away from the city, I do question the official narrative that these hijackers were able to then traverse those planes across multiple states to get to the city. I do find that very odd, if you will.
Imagine a world where the skies, once a symbol of freedom, become the stage for a chilling spectacle. On a fateful day in September, the air was thick with dread as the unthinkable unfolded before our very eyes. But what if the narrative we've been fed is just the tip of the iceberg? What if those planes weren't piloted by the hands of men, but controlled by unseen forces? Or, worse yet, what if they were never planes at all? As we delve deep into the shadows of one of history's most harrowing events, we'll explore the myriad of possibilities surrounding the aircraft of 9/11. From remote control technology that could manipulate the very air we breathe, to the tantalizing theories of holograms, or even government deception. Tonight, we embark on a journey that, through the fog of conspiracy, questions linger in the air like smoke from the towers that fell. So pour yourself a shadowy libation and let's navigate the turbulent skies of the planes of 9/11. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarick, here with my esteemed colleague, Mr. Phillips, and we're happy to have you back on another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Tonight, we are joined by Mark Conlon, who spent countless hours peeling back the layers of deception surrounding 9/11. Mark, it's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thanks for inviting me on. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you both.
Well, we appreciate it. You've been coming highly recommended to us. We've spent collectively probably 6 hours so far interviewing guests on the various aspects of 9/11, from Building 7 to the Pentagon, and the same question keeps coming up. And everybody we ask has pointed to you as the guy to talk to. What about the planes? What do we think about the planes? What are the planes? How were they controlled, and what might have happened? So before we kind of dive into that tonight, the first thing we like to do to kick things off with all of our interviews, especially when we have guests, is just ask, who are you and what were you like before 9/11 sort of happened? You delve deep into the conspiracy theory.
Well, I'm from the UK, as you probably guessed. Your listeners,
I would never guess, Mark.
Yeah, it goes back to 1988. I was 17, and I watched a documentary that was broadcast in the UK and Europe called The Men Who Killed Kennedy. It's quite a controversial documentary made by Nigel Turner, and it was that documentary that really blew my head off, so to speak, without, pardon the pun there, but it really did. It just opened up another world, to me, and that's, I remember thinking, God, if they can kill the president and cover it up for 25 years, that it was back in 1988, I thought, who else, is among us who's safe, really? So that's what got me started, and then I got into the RFK and MLK, Martin Luther King, and did some more reading about the Marilyn Monroe murder. And then the next major thing, I think, in the UK, which was quite big, which was Princess Diana's death.
Yeah.
and that had controversy around it. So, and then the next big thing was obviously 9/11, which was massive. That was like my JFK. That I wasn't alive when that happened, but it was just like everybody was stunned all around the world. So that's what really got me going with that. And then it wasn't till about 4 years later that I began to see, hearing that things wasn't quite right. And I didn't question it immediately. I had heard about things being questioned. I think it was Thierry Masson, the French guy who did Pentagate. But I didn't take too much notice for some reason. And it wasn't until about 2003-04, I was listening to an early internet radio show called Black Op Radio with Leno Sanik. And they were discussing about the towers and I think it was Tom Floco. And that got me going on to Dave Von Kleist's film In Plain Sight, which came out. And then the Loose Change films were shortly happening around that time as well. So it was beginning to grow. And that's when I started to immerse myself into 9/11, but only as a follower. I wasn't doing any research at that time. And I met William Rodriguez when he came over to the UK in 2007. And it was all about this 9/11, investigating 9/11. So I think it was around about 2010 I started to dig into things and started collecting some of Jeff Hill's phone calls that he made to videographers and witnesses. And I shared some of those with a guy called Andrew Johnson, who in the UK, who's an associate of Dr. Judy Wood's evidence and that. So he uncovered some things to do with her evidence she was presenting to do with how the towers were destroyed. So, I mean, it was around about 2012 that I really started to get into the planes, because I seen as well Richard D. Hall did a radar analysis with 175, and that's when it really started to happen for me. Then I really immersed myself into that from that point on, and started blogging around 2013 onwards.
You mentioned Andrew Johnson. He's another name that's sort of come up a lot as we've talked to people about the vast arrays of 9/11. What's fascinating to me, and Tim and I have talked about this a little off the air, is, Andrew Johnson's from the UK, you're from the UK, Norman, who in that circle a lot of people know, also from the UK. Why do you guys care about 9/11?
I think there's something inside myself. I don't know what it is. It's just that I'm driven. I don't like injustice, and it's quite a strong thing that's inside. And if I see something wrong, it's almost you want to try and do something about it, because the ramifications of it and the changes that were happening, especially for you guys in America with the Patriot Act and Homeland Security and all that TSA that got installed afterwards. That did sort of bleed over into the into us, quite a lot, really. And I did travel to America around about 2003-04, and I remember having to go through all this security then, and it's even worse now apparently.
Right.
I wasn't going, didn't have to go in the pod or anything like that when I went, luckily. But so it just strikes something. I again don't like being mugged off either, to be honest. And I think that's a bit of a trait. I think, probably Andrew could speak the same if you see something wrong, or Richard D. Hall, quite a few of us in the UK.
Yeah, no, that's what's fascinating to me. It's like, you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when you said like 9/11's the JFK of our generation. This is something that we've talked about quite a bit on the air and offline as well. It's just circling back to some of our previous episodes, I think the hardest part for us to reconcile 9/11, the reason people never looked at it as a conspiracy, is because when it happens the generation before, it's really easy to say, oh, those guys were stupid. They didn't get it. They didn't have the same access to technology. That would never happen again for us today. And then when it happens to you, you look at it with kind of an air of arrogance where it's like, well, no way. They'd never pull the wool over our eyes. And then as you start to unravel it a little bit, your arrogance, your ego kind of has to come into check. It's like, do you want to pretend that this couldn't happen to you? Or do you want to start asking questions as to why or how it happened to you? And for Tim and I, Tim was in Staten Island, New York. I was up in North New Jersey. I guess up at that point I was probably down in South Jersey, but still New Jersey, an hour out of this New York City. We had a lot of personal connections to New York City and friends and family and whatnot. And we've addressed this a lot. So to our listeners, they probably heard the story 100 times, but to lay the groundwork, when 9/11 happens, this isn't like something that's out of reach that you're seeing on the news. This is something that is at home to us. And so it took us a lot to get to the point where we even opened our ears a little bit to the prospect of this being a conspiracy theory. That was taboo to talk about because you're talking about friends and family members that might have died from some aspect of it. But Tim, as we get a little older, things have changed quite a bit for us. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you nailed it, right? Like it touches home to a lot of people, and to your point, many folks, especially in the area that we live in, right? We still live in New Jersey, have friends, family members that they lost on that day, and so for you to question the official narrative, they take it kind of as an attack. A personal attack against them, and that's clearly not what it is at all. We have tremendous respect for everybody that that was there that day, and we just want to get to the bottom of what could potentially have happened. It's good to be a critical thinker, right? I think if you blindly follow anything, that's a fool's errand, right? So it's good to have these conversations.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so I want to kind of get into the meat and potatoes a little bit here, the planes of 9/11. We've talked about the Twin Towers, we've talked about the Pentagon, we've talked about Building 7. Building 7, I think we can erase from the discussion entirely because there's no direct plane access there. But the Twin Towers and the Pentagon are probably the two biggest ones. And of course, the United 93 that had crashed out on its own. Where do you want to start, Mark?
Well, we can start where it all happened, really. And I can disclose a few things and go through some of the telemetry data that's almost been forgotten or overlooked. Just to preface this, I've got a hell of a lot of commission investigation files that were done by the FBI, NTSB. And I've built an archive of this stuff, and I've been reading through it for a long time. And just to add, I was involved in a film about the planes called 9/11 Alchemy, which catapulted and sort of accelerated a lot of the research that I was doing, which really moved things on some, really quick into different areas that I didn't expect to with the planes. So it's a very controversial one, and it's a very hard for some people to wrap their head around. But fundamentally, that particular part, which I will touch on later on, it's got massive implications, with this particular technology being kept under wraps and secret. Huge implications, probably even bigger implications than the C-19, down the line. So, yeah, I'm happy to start on where you'd want it to start, probably.
So, it's the morning of 9/11.
Yeah.
At I guess it was, I don't know off the top of my head, a couple airports, so let's just say a couple, but 3 airports, I guess, separately, or was it 2?
There's Boston, Logan, and then we had Dulles and Newark.
Okay.
Which is not far from you guys, I'm thinking.
That is our airport that we go out of all the time. That's what makes this whole thing really scary to us.
Yeah.
And so deep at home. So at this particular time, people are boarding on these aircraft and they're getting ready to go wherever they're getting ready to go. I had a personal family member who's actually supposed to be coming back into New York from just outside it. I want to say he was actually... I think he was in Boston, actually. Yeah, because he was really close. He said he could have driven or taken the train. They wanted to fly him in. And for whatever reason, they dumped his flight that day. He got postponed or he stayed longer. So there's people that were boarding these planes, supposedly. What happens next?
Well,
what happens with these planes?
Again,
is there an actual boarding process?
Well, this is difficult because, just to preface quickly as well, on the morning of 9/11, we've got a hell of a lot of war games exercise taking place, which, so it wasn't just a normal day in aviation. There was quite a lot of military exercises going on with scenarios of planes crashing into buildings, just to preface that. So it wasn't what we portrayed as a normal day in New York aviation history. It was very busy with military exercises. So regarding the boarding, this is a difficult area because for me, they have not proved that anybody boarded those planes. Because we've got no visual evidence, and we have, and some of the manifests are very suspect to do with that, and it's very thin on the ground in the FBI investigation of people who actually saw the passengers boarding. And I've got examples where you've got people who were interviewed and they were shown a spread of photographs, and they did not pick anybody out of them photographs that they recognised aboard them planes at Boston.
Interesting.
A little bit different with Dulles, and sort of the same for Newark, really, because they had no CCTV, which I find hard to believe myself. But it's a different ball game at Newark, which I can get onto with that.
In that period, I want to say the 90s, even though I know it's not technically the 90s, but that's still the 90s era. You're just coming out of the 90s into the early 2000s. Newark at that point, I mean, Newark's still a bit of a shithole, but Newark at that point was effectively an even bigger shithole. Like it was a very dated airport. So it's not totally out of the realm of possibility to me at that point coming out of the 90s that they wouldn't have had CCTV. Unusual, yes, but it wasn't. I mean, they just recently started modernizing that airport. It's hell on earth to go through that sometimes. So, okay. So I'm in agreement with you there. I tried to do a little bit of research before here, and it's often hard to find manifests or any hard evidence of people. You always hear the stories like I just gave before of people that were supposed to be on such and such a flight and weren't for whatever the reason might be, and not too many of the inverse. I want to come back to that later because I think this is going to touch on some of the theories that we're going to dive into. Thinking towards the Twin Towers, because that is most certainly the ones I'm most familiar with. To navigate a plane like that to hit the towers seems like it would take quite a bit of expertise and quite a bit of talent. Am I right or wrong on that?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah. And they did not have the capabilities to really steer those. It's not easy to steer a plane, an aircraft that size, into a target that's considerably small, really.
Right. And to hit it in the exact perfect spot that you need to hit.
Yeah, at impossible speeds. We're talking like for United 175, 586 miles per hour, which is impossible. It's not even... That is not aerodynamically possible in that plane. And I've got Boeing and people on record saying that.
Interesting.
Saying that those planes are incapable of flying that fast?
Yeah. I've got a phone call if you I can play all these things, I've got them ready if you want to hear them. But so that is a major red flag. The other thing is we did have a lot of cameras that captured I'm going to use allegedly 175. And there's a lot of issues with those, what was captured, the object captured on those videos. There's a lot of anomalies and issues which have led a lot of people down the wrong path, but that was down a wrong path to actually cover up what was really going on with that object in the sky or perceived object.
Sure.
And carry on.
I'm sorry.
No,
one of
go
the
ahead.
things that I found And I'd never really, and I'll be honest, right, Mark, until we started kind of looking at the research that you did, I had never really questioned the plane narrative as it pertained to 9/11, right? I was more attracted to, was it an inside job? Was all of it an inside job? Was it a controlled demolition at, at the Twin Towers and all the weird stuff that happened at the Pentagon? That's kind of really what I focused on.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I thought about, I was actually watching a presentation that you had done, and it kind of dawned on me that at certain points, these planes were very far away from New York City. And we're talking about pilots that not only weren't skilled, they were bad, right? I mean, if you read some of the reports, some of these pilots, these hijackers, actually trained here in New Jersey, and they were so bad that the instructors said, and I'm paraphrasing here, you can't continue to even try to take flight lessons, right? Like, you don't have the capabilities to do it. So where I'm getting with this is some of these planes were so far away from the city, I do question the official narrative that these hijackers were able to then traverse those planes across multiple states to get to the city. I do find that very odd, if you will.
Yeah. Well, again, there's telemetry data, which shows, just to talk about Flight 93, there's addressing data, communications aircraft addressing data, ACARS. It shows that in 1993 was over Champaign, Illinois at the time of the crash, and nowhere near Pittsburgh, which is very, very odd. And it was still receiving a message from the ground station at 10:10, which is impossible if that plane had crashed. Now, just to, if we want to get in a way of pedantic about it with things, you should have had 4 emergency locator transmissions signals going off when them 4 planes crashed on impact.
Sure.
That's what they're designed to do. A lot of people don't like this fact, but it's a fact. There wasn't one that went off. Wasn't one. And they should have went off. Now, some people have tried to say that there was a couple of ELTs that were faintly heard in Manhattan. But the one for allegedly Flight 11 was at 8:44. It was reported, which is 2 minutes too early, and it's a faint signal, by the way. So, and then you had another one at 8:58, which was meant. Some people are trying to say, "Oh, that's 175." Now, the problem you've got there is you cannot manually activate an ELT too early on either of those 767 flights on a Boeing plane. It's not capable to do that. And that's even on record in the FBI investigation with a gentleman, ex-pilot, senior operator as well, trainer, FAA I think, named Paul Thumser. He's on record as saying that you cannot activate an ELT in those planes. So, and the other thing is, it's ludicrous to even think that the hijacker would set off an ELT anyway. He probably wouldn't even know where to find the ELT, how to do that.
Right.
So we have 4 plane crashes and not one ELT to say a plane's crashed. Which is, to me...
And I'll be honest, I didn't really know what an ELT was until I started, looking at some of the research that you had done, right? So an ELT is designed to go off when a plane makes contact with terrain. And I guess essentially the reason for that is it lets first responders know where that plane is to go and then, assess the situation, right? Yeah. And so on and so forth. Let me ask you this. What kind of signal does an ELT give off? Is it radar? Is it an audible sound? What is...
It's like a beacon signal that's set off on a frequency.
Okay.
So I think it's 121 megahertz, and there's one further up in the 200s, I think, or it might be in the 400 frequency range. It's all on my website there. But
gotcha.
So the ELTs is a very people are trying, they don't want to accept this. It's a fact. It's even in their own commission investigation, although they didn't put that in there. That information was hidden away till around, I think it was around about 2009. and you've got to look for thousands of documents to try and find that type of information. So it's not an easy task, that you're going to come across. But that's just one. That's what we call telemetry, data. Now, this is admitted in the NTSB, their final report, which wasn't much of a report because they wasn't in charge of investigating the plane. Sorry, I got a little fly there. If I keep doing that. Yeah, I'm not mad. Although a lot of people probably think I am when I talk about 9/11, but
that's okay.
Yeah,
we are.
but the issue is, that people don't want to sort of accept those set of circumstances as fact, and it is a fact. And I wish somebody would, they do try and debunk with those other two erroneous ELTs, but saying that, they don't want to talk about a third ELT that went off over Ann Arbor. You see, now that was at 9:41. Now we know there was no plane crashes at 9:41 over it up near Detroit and Ann Arbor.
Yep.
So personally, I've got evidence to show that's probably part of the war games exercises with a different plane, which not a lot of people know about. But just going back, the ELT situation, you got to understand an ELT. If you can imagine your car alarm, it's got parameters set in. So if it's set too sensitive, and you live on, let's just say, a road where a bus goes past, or the wind's high, it can set your car alarm off. Now ELTs, especially in the Boeing 767, their parameters. If you do a hard bank, it's not going to set it off. So I think there was another case that Paul Thumser mentions as well, where when a plane, I think it was an Egypt plane, I can't remember the exact, again, it's all on my website, it goes into I think they crashed into the water. It never set off an ELT. It's got to be a collision, a real,
with terrain.
So it should have
hard terrain. Yep.
Yeah, especially going into the towers. That should have
Sure.
easily set the ELT off.
Right.
So let's go back to the towers then.
Yeah.
What hits the towers at that point? Was it a remote controlled plane? Was it a missile? Was it a military aircraft? What actually happens to the towers? In your opinion?
Right. It definitely wasn't a remote control plane.
Okay.
They don't explain the ELT. If you're going to remote control a plane into the towers, you're going to get an ELT. Right. They're going to want an ELT to prove a plane's hit the towers. Believe me, that's what they'd want to back up their story. Okay, so the other thing is, regarding what hit, we know it's not a remote control plane, because you look at the anomalies on United 175, you've got disappearing wing for 6 frames in the Norday footage. Now, all of a sudden, Richard Gage has come on and he said, the footage is grainy, it's from thousands of feet backwards and terrible cameras back then. No, the Norday was using a professional HD type of camera. It was a professional setup, and they were right under the towers and captured that plane, which I've got, if you want to see the video, which people, the wings phase out on that plane. And that is not going to happen with a remote control plane. You can have a solid object caught on video, on multiple videos. Yet there's a good number of videos which Matt out of MES, of Math Solutions, Easy Solutions, he put together some comparisons with a lot of videos, synchronizing the timing of when the wing disappears. So you shouldn't be having that. A lot of people try and put that down to compression. It's not compression.
It's happening on multiple different videos, is what you're saying.
Yeah, from different locations. Okay, now the Norday and sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you said you had that video. Can you share that video?
Yeah, I can.
If you got it queued up, yeah, there's a share button right there on the screen.
So I can share my screen, yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be awesome to see. Those that are listening on Spotify, hop on YouTube. We'll try to describe it as best we can here, but we are looking at video, so I guess the description is going to be subjective to each of you using your own eyes on that one. But so that was, we did interview Richard Gage, and that was a question we had come up. He was respectful of the fact that he wouldn't answer that question. He said, I'm an architect, I'm not a pilot, so he didn't want to go down that realm, at least with us, in that subject. I think he's been under a lot of scrutiny over those views, so I think he's been backing off of it. Yeah. But that was always my inclination as well, is I come from a technology background, and in that, compression can ruin a lot of audio, video. It can ruin a lot of images as well. Doesn't exclude that, but I've went under the impression to this point that the planes that hit the towers, to me, felt like planes. So that's why I'm kind of curious to hear this different perspective. When we get into the Pentagon, I have a completely different opinion there. But that's why it's, it's starting to become more eye-opening as we look at different data. And again, this ELT is entirely new to me, not something I'm even familiar with whatsoever. So,
well, I can run you through quickly some of the presentation that I normally do. I can do it quickly. So, can you see the screen okay, guys?
We can, yeah.
Yeah. I'll just get onto it. So, this is where an ELT would be situated. I'll leave it on this sort of screen because I can go through the slides because I won't use them all because I'll be there. I'll be here for hours.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah. So this is where the ELT is actually located in that plane, just so you can get an idea in that type of plane. So you wanted to see the Norday, didn't you? Clip. I've got a lot of stuff on here, so I'm just going to click on this now. This is a comparison which I was talking about, which is the Lou Korchesny video and the Norday brothers. Now this is the second plane here. Now I'll go through this now. In both the Lou Korchesny video and the Norday footage, you've got the disappearing wings. Now, that's just one element. I'm just going to try and find. Now, I did a study on this quite a while ago where so many frames in the Norday, I'll see if I can blow that up a little bit. So many frames in the Norday footage have got no wing or tail section. And then it starts to phase back on frame 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. So, and that was took with a professional camera, which is, I think it's at the museum you got there in New York. At the museum, they've got their camera. So it wasn't a piece of crap camera that you'd have for that type. It's actually, it was a good camera. And the same said for the Lou Korchesny or Korchesny, whichever you pronounce his name. He had the same. He was filming on a beta video, which was quite superior compared to like your normal videotapes back then. And you can, people are trying to pass this off as compression, and it's not compression because it's happening from multiple angles. And Matt's put that together. Can you see that okay with the wings and stuff?
Yeah.
Well,
So this particular screenshot is the one that I'm most familiar with.
Yeah.
And it looks like basically the nose of the plane is embedded in the building without any explosion happening anywhere.
Yeah.
That to me has always struck me as, okay, that's just a delay in the camera. It's compression. It is what it is. The other angle is interesting. It's not something I'm familiar with. So patching together multiple angles does obviously, it changes that thought a little bit there, because it does add additional questions. It's unusual to see the same artifact in film in multiple cameras or multiple angles, obviously. So that's interesting.
And I'm going to do, this is what Matt put together for me, because I've done a lot of, we've sort of collaborated a little bit with this because he's been interested in it as well, sort of aroused his interest. So this is, you can see this for yourself.
Yep,
there we go.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll just let that on a loop so you'll get an idea of what
So what are we actually seeing here? Because it almost looks like the plane's going behind the building.
Yeah, you're looking at the south tower, but from the north face. A little bit. You're just off.
Okay.
So that's where one of the Norday brothers was situated.
Right.
And he's looking up. And that's when he's captured the second plane.
Oh,
there.
and you can see, right.
Yeah.
And you can see the wing sort of change there, and that it almost looks like bigger.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now,
so what do you think this is then?
This is I've spoke in the past about this development that started. It probably started before the 90s. How the military and the Pentagon wanted to use. Now, I'm going to use holograms loosely because a lot of people want to call it a hologram. It's far beyond a hologram, this technology. But just to get started, the military were very interested in using holograms as decoys and for psyops back in the early 90s, but it probably started before that, to be honest. But they're on record, and they ran a secret program in the 90s, which was spoken about, but got put into the black world, the black budget, and it was a secret program which they spoke about. And I think it was William Arkin spoke about it. We've got quite a few reports, of their intention that they'd like to use psyops and use this type of technology. I mean, we've got it here, in articles where they talk about secret programs established in 1994 to pursue the very technology for psyops. This is the Gulf War hologram. This, they're talking about dismissing it, but they couldn't dismiss it. The Washington Post learns about this super secret program, apparently, which was, and it was an application for the holographic projector.
I did just do a little bit of quick research here, and there is a program that involves the deployment and development of decoys designed to mislead enemy radar and missile systems. These decoys can simulate the radar signatures of aircraft or other military assets. That's called the Tactical Decoy System, TDS. And there's a whole bunch of other ones. There's the Advanced Tactical Fighter, which that's like electronic warfare, including the use of decoys and countermeasures with stealth aircraft, integrated air defense system. So there's most certainly precedent, like public precedents for these types of programs, it looks like. And as we've come to learn, if there's something public, then most likely there's something more nefarious or more technologically advanced that is certainly not public. It's a little more kept under wraps. So that's interesting. I did not know about that. Yeah,
you've also got it mentioned here. Again, this was a very, very something they were very interested in doing for decoys, things like that. So, the military, it says there, the military certainly appears to believe in the potential use of holograms, for deceptive holographic imaging. So this is not something out of their realms. And as we know, if you've ever studied the military, they're normally 30 odd years ahead anyway in any type of technology before they let us even know about it. But my contention is they're certainly not going to let you know about this type of technology, because this technology, just my personal opinion, they want to use down the line. There's also a need for that, which I can talk about later on as we move forward. I think a lot of people are familiar with this holographic airborne projector. Now, this has again tried to be debunked, but it's showing the interest of what they are looking for. Now, have you ever heard of the RAND Corporation?
I don't think
What's
so.
the name of it?
The RAND, RAND Corporation.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Well,
we had like a home appliances store called Rand's that was by us. They sold used refrigerators, but I suspect it's not the same.
Well, they were very interested. Now, this is a recent report. They were very interested in China's development of this type of technology. Now, it's even, mentioned in their research paper that they, or report that they put out, that this potential use regarding China would be to actually be able to put a three-dimensional volumetric image into space with sound, which we know they can use plasma to broadcast sound and images, three-dimensional images. That's something they're capable already of doing. Might be on a smaller scale, but they're capable of doing it, and they've demonstrated that. So,
I've actually recently, and I wish I could remember who spoke of this, but somebody was theorizing that UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them today, aren't actually any kind of physical being, but they're holograms. I find that very interesting. If this is some kind of technology that they had been working on, I mean, if this was used in 2001, right, we know that they had clearly had to have been working on it for quite some time. And we're talking about 2024. This is technology that could have potentially been implemented for, 3+ decades at this point. So I do find that to be pretty interesting.
Yeah. So just to say, just because it sounds like, we're onto the hologram thing already, but I can categorically tell you from what I've looked into and using the official data and telemetry data that the 4 planes were still airborne at the time of the crashes. Now,
interesting.
If you want, I'll just quickly run through it so you've got a grasp of what I'm talking about. So, Flight 11. Now, we've got recordings saying that Flight 11 was still airborne and it was on its way to Washington. Now, I've got the recording there as well if people want to hear that. So I'm not just making that up. This is off their own communications that they were aware, and they even give this a tail number, and they even give it a coordinates, which places it 5.7 miles past the towers at the time.
And Mark, for those that are unaware, Flight 11 was one of the flights that should have crashed into the towers, correct?
Yes, that's the first plane, yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about the first plane, okay.
Yeah, so, is my screen still on? Just to double check.
Yes.
I'll run through this quite quickly to save,
sure.
Yeah. So, and I probably won't play everything, but I'll play some key pieces. Tell me if you can sort of see this plane at the moment. There should be some writing on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we see the writing.
Just had a report that American 11 is still in the air and it's on its way heading towards Washington.
Okay, American 11 is still in the air?
Yes.
On its way towards Washington?
There was evidently another aircraft that hit the tower. That's the latest report we have.
Okay.
I'm going to try to confirm an ID for you, but I would assume he's somewhere over either New Jersey or somewhere further south.
Okay, so American 11 isn't the hijack at all then, right?
No, he is a hijack.
American 11 is a hijack?
Yes.
And he's going into Washington?
This could be a third aircraft.
Okay, third aircraft hijack heading towards Washington. No. Okay, American Airlines is still airborne. 11, the first guy, he's heading towards Washington. Okay, I think we need to scramble Langley right now, and I'm gonna take the fighters from Otis and try to chase this guy down if I can find him. Yeah. You sure? He has MCC. Okay. He's heading towards Langley, or I should say Washington. American 11, the original guy, he's still airborne. We're still getting a... We're getting a position.
Got
a position?
A couple of hijacks on the real world. Gotta go. All right, they are...
Okay. Foxy, scramble Langley, head him towards the Washington area.
Roger that.
Could be American...
Hold on a second.
We're trying to get a code on this guy right now. We do have a tail number. It's a... what was the tail number?
It's concerned 4546.
November
November 334 Alpha Alpha. If we can find him, we're trying to get the mode. We're trying to get position on this guy. So then we'll run on him. Yep. Okay. Bye. Okay.
So that's basically telling you that they've got Flight 11 and they're saying it's still airborne, it's on its way to Washington. And they give a lat long and a tail number, which corresponds with Flight 11. So, and which places it 5.7 miles, the coordinate does, past the North Tower. So,
and what was the timing on this?
This is after 9 o'clock. This is.
Wow.
When they took the
Interesting.
chitter chatter is, it's after the crash, because as you'll hear on the audio, it's they believe that 11's gone into the towers, and then they go, no, this is another plane. Flight 11 still airborne. It's on its way to Washington. There's a good reason why it's on its way to Washington, and I'll come up with that later on, because there's a very, very good reason to do with that. So we got Flight 11 still airborne. By the way, we've got something called the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. Have you ever heard of that? It's a database, yeah. Well, we've got Flight 11 has no wheels off time recorded in the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. Now, they've tried, years later, they tried to use a lame excuse to say, oh, well, we didn't input it in and all this. But there's no human intervention with that, because your wheels off times on an airplane are recorded within and embedded in the ACARS data. You have a sensor that once the wheels leave the ground, the sensor picks that up and it's recorded. And then everything's being communicated with ACARS, which is the aircraft communication addressing radio system. So, and that's in constant communication, and it's constantly checking the plane and its status, that it's all, working correct. So
that was
so,
going to be
Mark,
my question on that one too.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. It's ACARS. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, ACARS. Yeah. Yeah, it's
now,
the aircraft communications.
Got it. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of almost assimilate that to the way that cell phone towers work, right? So as you are nearing a cell phone tower, your cell phone picks up that signal from that tower. Is it fair to say that it kind of works in a similar fashion, so that as a plane is flying above?
Yeah, very similar. Now this is a bit like an emailing system, text messaging system, more so.
Got it.
Than voice. And then once one of them messages is delivered from, you get like an uplink and a downlink. So a downlink would be from the aircraft, the uplinks from the right, routed through to the nearest station to the aircraft. So what that should do is, once the message is delivered, it gets like an audible signal as well with the print off to let the that it's been received, the message. So this is more, how can I put this? This is more not controversial. It's more to do with United 175, which is the second plane. So we've sort of touched on that. We got some conflicting data with the BTS for Flight 11, showing there's no wheels off time. It gets a bit complex at times, but I've spent a long time trying to decipher what all that data means, because a lot of people want to discount that data because it don't marry up with that data. But actually, if you take the data on face value, you actually get quite a compelling argument for duplicate flights. Now, that's going to sound pretty mad what I'm saying, but you've got gate issues to do with Flight 11. You've got a lot of media reporting that it pushed back from gate 26, and they still report gate 26, a lot of media, but the official gate is meant to be gate 32 for Flight 11.
Is there any precedence for duplicate flight incidents, as particular at that time, where maybe just something was recorded wrong, or they named the same flight, the same number? Is there precedence for that?
I doubt that would. I'd be highly surprised if that happened. It just, it's like a big no-no from that happening. Now,
right.
You know, I've got an eyewitness who's seen passengers gathering for flight 11, which came in, by the way, as I think it was 198, flight 198, which came in from San Francisco. But the person who witnessed flight 11 coming in, that they had it coming in from Los Angeles. So there's something very strange going on with that, especially when you got the data of flight 11 not taking off. Again,
Right.
Yeah, again, Jeff Hill rang up the Bureau of Transportation Statistics and tried to find out why, you know, what this data was. And to them, or the woman who was talking to him on the phone said, that's as if it was a cancellation flight. She didn't know she was talking about flight 11. He was inquiring on why you had all these zeros to do with the wheels off time. Plus, you have a very strange incident with the ACARS data as well with flight 11, where just before it's going to take off, I think there's a 20-minute void where the flight identification number is AA0000. Now, that is very, very strange, and that should not be happening at the time.
And what does that typically mean?
Well, it should... The flight should have been AA0011.
Oh.
So for some reason, and this is more as well, more telling at Dulles, which I'll come on to quickly down the line. I'm just trying to go through quite a lot of telemetry data for you guys, so you can.
Sure.
So we've got some conflicting data going on there with flight 11 and still being airborne and heading towards Washington. Now that's on record. That's not my opinion. That is the official evidence. You know, they've tried to say it was a phantom flight, but they had a tail number for it and they had precise coordinations for it. So I find that pretty, I don't accept that. If it was a phantom flight, why they got precise location of it past the towers when it should have been crashed and it shouldn't have even been a primary target, which means on radar it wouldn't have had a data block telling you what the flight was, altitude, all the things like that in the data block. They wouldn't have even been able to, you know, you wouldn't have had a primary target if it crashed. So there's something very wrong there with flight 11. Now, I'll buzz over onto flight 175. We've got the same circumstance of it still being airborne, and it was still receiving ACARS messages, except these ACARS messages were over Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh, which again is nowhere near you guys, is it?
No.
Now, you should have...
So, this is the second plane. This is the second plane, right?
This is the second plane now. I'm just going to get onto the screen and so you can... So... get that on. So we got...
it's drivable distance, but it's not that close.
Exactly. So what you're looking at here, can you see the screen okay?
It's about 6-7 hours away. Pittsburgh is 6-7 hours away. Harrisburg is about 3 hours.
Right. So we're still seeing the UA 175 slide right now.
Right, you're not seeing the new one. Oh God, what's going on with that?
You know, I'll tell you, it was flight 175 that kind of put that, I don't want to say red flag, but made me think, or I had that thought of, hey, that's not, I mean, it's remotely close to New York, but it's not close. And that's what really, I was like, man, you have unskilled pilots. How are they able to navigate and turn that plane around all the way out near Pittsburgh and then bring it back to New York City? And that was the one that kind of did it for me. And I was like, this is weird.
Exactly. Exactly. Can you see the new slide on the screen to do with the ACARS?
Yes.
It's like a picture.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So I can work with that. So what you're looking at here is, this is something that 9/11 Maps put together. He's a really genius. He put all the coordinates in from the official data and the radars and data.
Okay.
And what this, so he's put the route in And what you're looking at here is this is at the time when Flight 175 crashed. Now, Flight 175 crashed at 9:03 and 11 seconds. Yet it's receiving an ACARS message over here at 9:03, 17 seconds. So this is highly unusual that it didn't get the message sent from around any of these ground stations around here in New York. It has roughly about a 200-mile radius back then, the ACARS. So you shouldn't have been having this ACARS message being routed through here. What that's telling us is that the plane probably didn't make that turn and carried on along this route, which is why it's being picked up over Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. So this is very, very damning evidence. This is official evidence, their own ACARS data from the flight. Now again, this data didn't come out willingly. It came out under Freedom of Information Act, so it was withheld. It wasn't freely given.
Sure. So for anybody that's listening and not watching with us, we were taking a look at the flight map of am I correct, Flight 75, Mark?
Yeah.
And it shows the flight turning around somewhere in Pennsylvania. The official narrative is that it turned around somewhere. It appeared to be over, I'd say, northeastern Pennsylvania. But then we have an ACARS hit. Maybe it's not the best word to use as we're discussing this, but we have a ping from ACARS that is much further away over Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's correct. Which indicates that the plane carried on and didn't make the turn, which is a common theme which I'm going to present to you guys as we go on through the flights.
Sure.
So the other issue is Flight 175 was picked up on MSNBC News at 10:25 over Connecticut. Again, this was on Flight Explorer. Now, Flight Explorer is a real-time program which is sort of shared with operators like the FAA. So you shouldn't be getting this. And now this was showed on MSNBC at 10:25, and it showed Flight 175 over Connecticut, which is over here. If I just go to that, can you see that better?
Yeah. Now this is interesting.
Yeah. Now they hover over all the planes. I've got this actual news footage, so I'll send you all the footage so you can insert it into what we're talking about to make it more.
Right in here.
Yeah. So what we're looking at here is it goes live on the news, and they bring up this Flight Explorer program, which is a real-time program. So what you're looking at there is all the planes that's left in the sky still after the ground stop. And they hover over a couple of them planes, and the one they hover over, which you can see in the photo, is United 175. Now it's written as a UAL, which is the proper number for United Airlines. That's the proper code that you'd use. And it's 175, and it's got the exact 300. So 310 0439 is the altitude. And it's telling you it's a B762, which means it's a 767-200 series. And it's telling you it's from Boston at 8:15 a.m. With its LAX at 0144 p.m. So this is damning evidence.
Yeah. What I find odd is that we just looked, and it was a little bit after, I think you said it was 9:03, if I remember correctly. Yeah. We just talked about it 30 seconds ago. I wish I had a better memory. But it was by Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, right? Which looks like it's traveling westward towards LAX. What I find odd about this is that now we're talking 10:25, so over an hour later, and it's in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So you have a plane that's traveling towards the West Coast, and then all of a sudden it's back on the East Coast. Yeah.
And it seems to be in the direction going back to Boston. I'll just say that when you strike a line through that plane, it lines up perfectly with Boston. Sure. Now, there's no military. I don't think it's a corridor, and I don't think there's many military bases along there, and it's far too high in altitude to be coming down to land at any time soon. So
Sure.
if you get what I mean. So we know it's
Gotcha.
not coming into land. But this again is showing, it could be showing two conflicting pieces of data, isn't it?
Right.
You've got one
Was there
plane.
instruction to go back to your airport of departure?
I think considering where it might have been, I think they would have landed them at the nearest or available airport rather than keeping it in the air, because this was issued a ground stop at that time. Now a lot of planes were told not to go to Reagan National. They were ordered not to, but that's a key airport, by the way, which I'm going to get onto later. Just to say, Flight 93 has loads of evidence, which is on the duplicate plane, call it theory or evidence. So this is damning evidence. This is, it's not great for them, for the perps.
Sure.
So just to sum up there, we got two planes in more or less two different locations. Now I've blown this up just because some people said, "Oh, it's not 175 and this." But if you go in the BTS, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, there's no other United Airlines that sort of fits that bill on the numbering. So you would clearly see if that was, there's not a 178. There's not, things like that. They could be all.
Got it. So there's no other flight with even a similar number that they could have confused.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So we did all that.
Sure.
I'll just go down. So I'll quickly move on to 77. So again, by the way, with 175, we've got the BTS takeoff times issue again happening. This time it's a little bit different because we've got the official story says it took off at 8:14. Yet in the BTS data, the wheels off time is 8:23.
Okay. So just more conflicting data.
Conflicting data. Now, the planes data, when them wheels, I've got to reiterate this and hammer this home to people, when the wheels leave the floor, the sensor kicks in like that and it's recorded.
Sure.
That's not a human intervention.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you. Coming into this, I one of the questions that I had was, hey, is it just somebody recording data incorrectly or some kind of human error? But to your point, this is all done automatically through computer systems. This isn't an individual that's logging something with a pen and paper or even typing it in. This is done automatically.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's capturing everything and all sorts of data. It's capturing the performance of the plane, everything, So
Gotcha.
The wheels off time should not be 8:14. So again, you've got two pieces of conflicting data. Now, do you discount one over what the government says over the other, which is, 8:23? Now, the thing is, we have a witness who was named Stephen Miller. Now, he was on, I think he was on a flight that was due to take off, and he was in the queue behind 175. Now, his plane took off at 8:29, I think it was, or 8:28. I think it was might have been 8:28. So for 8:23, it was a 5-minute delay. Now, normally it's about 3 minutes. So that would be more in keeping with the 3 minutes, the 5 minutes, in his memory, rather than an 8:14. Now, he's an eyewitness who was behind 175 taking off. But to him, he took off, and his plane took off at 8:28. So you'd have quite a big gap from 8:14 to 8:28 compared to the 8:23, the A cars and BTS data. So again, is this a duplicate flight, or is it part of the exercise? This is what we're trying to get down to.
Sure.
So yeah, I'll start getting into an area you like, which is 77, which you asked Adam about, wasn't he?
On the next episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Pentagon, for me, has always been the biggest red flag on the planes.
They couldn't find this plane for a whole 18 minutes. It was less, I think it may have been more for the FAA.
Disappears off of radar. So what would cause a plane under natural or unnatural circumstances to disappear from radar?
So that's a fourth piece of evidence. That's Flight Explorer that was shown of Flight 77, and it's showing it not making the turn, and they put that on CNN on the 12th of September.
So going back to the passengers, and you're able to identify who some of those folks are, what's the significance of that? Do we have proof that those people are still with us? Do we have proof that they perished? What's the significance of that?
You've also got a plane at D26 gate, the official gate, and you've got some passengers going onto that plane. However, we've also got telemetry or database information from the BTS, Bureau of Transportation Statistics, saying that the plane never left the ground.
Previously on Cocktails and Conspiracies, the planes of 9/11. To navigate a plane like that to hit the towers seems like it would take quite a bit of expertise and quite a bit of talent.
Not proved that anybody boarded those planes.
What hits the towers at that point? Was it a remote controlled plane? Was it a missile?
It's like a big no-no from that happening.
Somebody was theorizing that UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them today, aren't actually any kind of physical being, but they're holograms.
Is there any precedence for duplicate flight incidents?
Some of these planes were so far away from the city, I do question the official narrative that these hijackers were able to then traverse those planes across multiple states to get to the city. I do find that very odd, if you will.
Pentagon for me has always been the biggest red flag on the planes. I've never once considered that the planes that hit the Twin Towers were anything but planes. The Pentagon, though, I did. The planes and the towers, I know that there was lack of aircraft parts and stuff like that, and I know that's a whole separate discussion. But for the Pentagon, with the Twin Towers, it just felt like there was so much demolition from what I've subscribed to believe, potential controlled demolitions, that it could have actually destroyed it and getting lost in the mix. The Pentagon, though, was such a cleaner, for lack of a better word, a cleaner, hit, break, here's everything. And the fact that there wasn't anything there. I mean, we're not talking about giant skyscrapers coming rumbling down and spreading over the city. This was such an isolated incident. And there's been nothing. And that's been since very, very early on. That was really the first one to me that I thought might have been a conspiracy, and maybe not even so much a conspiracy as like a directed terrorist attack, that they weren't sending a plane in there. Then you talk the discussion on the angle that the plane have to come down into to hit the Pentagon itself is just really low, where everybody would have seen it or saw it or knew what was going on. So that's been my entry into this. So I'd love to turn the floor back to you. What's going on in the Pentagon?
Yeah, I'll head over with that now. So, just to be on the record, this is taken from official documents, what we're looking at here. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
I'll increase. So, we're looking at AA-77, which is Flight 77's radar. So, we got the flight path here. Now, it goes off radar, and we have a missing 18 minutes during this turn. Absolutely nothing. That's the first thing which I find very suspicious, because if the transponder switched off, they should have still had a primary on it. Now that means you've just got like the blip on the screen,
right?
But you've got something to track. but apparently they couldn't find this plane for a whole 18 minutes. It was less, I think it may have been more for the FAA, 18 minutes, and I think it was less for the other organisation. I can't remember off the top of my head. Might have been who was tracking that flight. Can't think off the top of my head right now, but it had some missing time on that turn. So it goes.
Are there
apparently the
parameters on that too with the radar? When you're tracking a flight, if a flight lands, can the radar pick that up?
Not when it goes goes below a certain level, I think.
Okay.
And I'll say
okay.
I think on that one. But
that's okay.
Have,
yeah. I mean, that's always our asterisk to every single one of these episodes is, hey, we're just people talk. We're not the foremost experts in anything. We're just talking and we're presenting evidence as it comes to us. And that's all we're doing here. So if anybody's out there that's actually in aviation and wants to correct us, by all means, please do it in the comments. But it's not a big deal. Not the end of the world. Doesn't dismiss from the point here.
So that's where it goes off, completely off, where they say they didn't track the plane. And they didn't start tracking it again till 9:09, and that would have been in a primary, so that wouldn't have had any identification features about that. So it wouldn't have had the data block on telling you the altitude, the speed, the flight number, destination, all that sort of stuff. So what we do have though is we've got some conflicting evidence where it seems that AA-77 did not make that turn on the Ohio and Kentucky border as we're led to believe. And they all the four planes did these turns, didn't they? So the pattern is, it seems to be that they didn't make the turn, what we were told. Now, this is quite, again, damning evidence that was kept away from public scrutiny. And this is the DCC radar evidence that was released under the Freedom of Information Act. Now, this shows that AA-77 did not turn round on that border with Kentucky and Ohio, and it continued to fly on, and it flew over Missouri and St. Louis Airport and into Kansas before making a turn again and heading back towards Missouri before disappearing off radar. Now, I'm going to put this up on the screen, and I'll just enlarge that so people can have a look. So we got Washington Dulles here. So we've got the flight path where 77s took off. Now it would have had its data block and everything identifying here of the plane. So it would have known that that's flight 77. And when it gets to this border here with Ohio and Kentucky, that's when it makes this turn allegedly, and then goes off, this transponder switched off, goes to primary, so it's not identifiable. It's just a blip, essentially. But what we've got here with the radar evidence, the DCC radar evidence, it's tracking the plane over Kentucky, all the way over to Missouri, and past St. Louis Airport, over into Kansas. And then it makes this turn backwards, and then disappears off radar. Now, this radar evidence, when you compare it to the RADES radar, which was submitted by the government, which they show you, and all of a sudden they put these coordinates. The coordinates on this, after, when it's allegedly making the turn, are totally different, and it's taking it in the wrong direction. So what I tried to do is verify this a little bit more, because I believe that AA-77 didn't make that turn and carried on forward. And like I say, went over Kentucky, went over Missouri, St. Louis Airport, and then into Kansas. So that's what you're looking at on the screen right now.
So you said that eventually, at some point, it completely disappears off of radar. So what would cause a plane under natural or unnatural circumstances to disappear from radar?
I think it's probably descending. Now, I can only say this is speculation. I want to identify it as that it possibly could have landed at St. Louis Airport, because that was one of the airports in that vicinity when it was done this turn backwards and headed back into Missouri, and then disappears off the radar.
Got it.
It actually flew over, more or less over St. Louis Airport on the way forward to begin with, and then sort of heads back. Now, whether that did that to circle round and head back and land there, but the interesting thing is, and I have got a photograph, but I can't put it up because it's licensed, and I don't want to get you guys in trouble.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, or myself. That there's a picture at St. Louis Airport, and you've got a fleet of planes which are not United, they're not American Airlines. I think they might be Continental planes, all in a row, and you have one American Airlines plane that looks the same as what the plane was.
Ooh, interesting.
Flight 77.
If you don't mind, send that to me offline. I'd like to at least just take a peek of it. And,
yeah, and it was
for
took
our
on
viewers, you'll have to
9/11.
do some Googling.
Yeah, it was
That's
took on
fascinating.
9/11. You see, the thing is, I couldn't. You can't verify the tail number, so I can't say it is that plane. But I
Right,
find it very
right.
coincidental how there's one plane sat
Right.
on the tarmac with all these other planes,
Sure.
which is different to the fleet. That's almost
Right.
like it shouldn't be there.
I like to
Right.
call that common sense evidence.
yeah. So,
Well, so to your point on common sense evidence too, Tim, you asked about what could stop a plane from going on radar. I had the same thought as Mark was talking about it, and so I looked it up real quick, and you'll laugh at some of the things. Obviously, transponder failure, that's the most common one that you'd think, but the fact that you're coming back on a transponder kind of rules that out. And then it's a lot of obstructions, so terrain obstructions or being in remote regions. So by terrain obstructions, we're talking about like mountains, right?
Sure.
Or
Yeah.
remote regions, being over the oceans. And based
Sure.
on that map we just looked at, I did not see an ocean, and I didn't see any major mountain ranges that plane would have crossed. And then outside of that, either high altitude maneuvers or low altitude maneuvers. And those outside of like stealth technology,
Sure.
that's it. And as I'm looking through this, I'm literally laughing to myself because you can knock these items out one at a time.
Right.
Especially
Yeah.
for a chunk of time. We're talking about 18 minutes. So any maneuvering you're doing to be high altitude or low altitude for 18 minutes seems odd to me, or seems like there's something else that could have gone wrong. If you're high altitude, you're probably depressurizing the cabin, I imagine, at that point. And if you're low altitude for 18 minutes, you're probably crashing into something, unless you're in the Great Plains of Arkansas, as we've always talked about, right? But the
tumbleweeds and sand.
The tumbleweeds, yeah. But yeah, that's ooh. I like this one a lot. This one's
So-
leaning into what I already felt like I knew, so I feel like a good pat on the back.
So with that evidence, I tried to find some other evidence to try and see if this, correlated together. Was in continuity with what we're seeing on that radar. Now, there was a couple of areas which were in the transcripts to do with the air traffic control. And there's chitter chatter about, it's not the best transcribing in the world, by the way. But they're talking about tracking him over Missouri in this piece here. And then you've got AA-77 with question marks.
Wow.
Now, this is official transcripts. And then we've got another one here. And I think this is at 10:38, and it's got AA Flight 77 is in Kansas City area, heading westbound. And there's the source, 9/11 Commission Files, Team Box 8. Team 8, Box 17, Miles Cara, Work Files, Folder 1 of 3. So, again, this isn't my opinion, this is what
Sure.
is contained in their files.
And it's
then-
tough to dispute.
Yeah. So what we also have, so that's three pieces of evidence that possibly didn't make that turn, and it's compelling evidence. That one, what you're looking at on the screen now, is very telling. And then we've got this. So that's a fourth piece of evidence that's Flight Explorer that was shown of Flight 77, and it's showing it not making the turn, and they put that on CNN on the 12th of September.
Like, was this intentional by CNN, or was it accidental, where they're trying to dispel it? Was that the mindset, or they're just showing it to try to talk about it and not realizing that we're exposing?
I think they didn't realise. I think they were talking about it and they just didn't realise what was happening, to be honest. And it shows you it didn't make the turn. And that, again, is real. That was real-time data.
CNN hasn't gotten...
Yeah.
They haven't gotten any more intelligent since then, so...
No. So it was... I mean, that was recorded and shown the day after, but that would have been real-time data. That was recorded on the 11th.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, all very strange. So, so what I'm saying there is my contention, again, is that Flight 77 was still airborne, and that was at 10:38, some of them, that message. And you can see on the radar picture I showed you, the screenshot. Now I have got that pictures of it on my YouTube channel. I show you this in moving form, so people can see it rather than just a screenshot. So my contention is that we've got 3 of the planes so far still airborne at the time of the crashes, and that's done with telemetry, what they call telemetry data. So that's radar, ACARS. We've got the BTS showing that Flight 11 didn't take off. Now, the strange thing again here is we've got Flight 77 didn't have a wheels off time in the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. Which is
common thread.
A common thread, yeah. Again, very strange. And we also have this strange ACARS like we did with 11, where it goes to a non-existent flight number just before takeoff for about 10 minutes. And that shouldn't be happening.
Right.
Very strange.
That's atypical.
Yeah. You shouldn't go to 0000. The flight identification number should be AA0077 in this case.
I'd love to know, and maybe you've already done this research or asked the right people, if I'm working for the FAA and I'm managing these flights, and you're assigning, I know they're slapping the flight number on the back of the airplane, but that's not technical at all. But now I'm in the computer system, I'm assigning a number to this particular airplane. When you reassign that flight number, if you take it off of a plane and put it on another, is that what's going on? Like, does that explain why these numbers are changing and they become anomalous? Because in any other facet of programming, that's what happens. Like, you shut one thing down, like a website, for example. Perfect example.
Yeah.
A domain name points to a location on the internet, right? So that flight number is pointing to a location of this airplane. I can change the location of that website anywhere. There will be a short momentary hiccup when that goes offline and comes back online, and it's pointing to a completely different address somewhere else. And so, again, thinking from a programming perspective, it almost makes sense to me that could be what is happening. I don't know if that's something you've explored at all. Yeah,
I have, and it's in my other PowerPoint. Because what actually happened was you've got, I think it's called the INS positional data at Dulles Airport with Flight 77. Now, that was not assigned at gate D26, which was the official gate. It shows the plane on the opposite concourse, either on gate D21 or gate 19. Now, I have evidence of photographs that was took by a lady of people at the boarding gate going to board the plane. Now, I double checked in the photo that them people was actually at D26. This was a picture taken by a lady called Gwyneth Faulkner, and this is of some children who won a National Geographic competition, and they was accompanied by their teachers on this National Geographic, I think it's something to do with an eco trip or something they were on. And I think these two individuals here are part of the National Geographic team, I think. And then you got like the teachers here, 3 teachers, and the children there. Now, this is before they go in to the boarding area. And can you see this photo?
Yep.
This was actually taken at gate D26 at the boarding area where they're going to go through a door and down the jet port, is it, onto the plane. Now, I've identified some of these passengers here who are not part of the school trip. But I did double check to see whether it was the right gate, and I just can that blown up for you. Should be bigger, yeah. So you've got this ramp that goes up to the other level, which is quite. You haven't really got that anywhere else in Dulles that I know of. And this is it's obviously newer now. It's been done out, but we've got a bit of an old one down here, and we've got the newer, brighter one. And so you can see this. Some of the key points that I've lined up, which was the fire extinguisher there, and the ramp area. This bit here looks like a new addition. This partitioning, I don't know what they're running up there, but that's new because it had American written on there at one point. So I sort of confirmed it that it was that gate, and I found out who the passengers was. I labelled them up. And
so, Mark, to be clear, these are passengers boarding Flight 77?
Allegedly, yeah.
Got it.
At gate D26, which is the official gate that we're told. Now,
gotcha.
Yeah, so we sort of identified the school children. When I present this, when I have do the actual presentations, it's all linked to who they are.
Sure.
Yeah, verified. So these are the other. I've labelled them up. The other passengers here. Mm-hmm. So that's that lady here. I know it's got the same hairstyle. You can't see her face, but it just so happens to have exactly the same hairstyle. It's got this individual B here. Mm-hmm. And D, you've got here. And then you got G, which is this individual over there. So I linked to them all on the memorial. So I've got, I went through that. Now, the same lady who took that photo actually took a photo of the plane at gate D26. So I'll just enlarge this. Again, I cannot verify by the tail number, but this plane is at gate D26, which is the official gate that we're told that a plane took off. Yet,
so that should be Flight 77.
That should be Flight 77, but I cannot 100% verify it because I cannot see the tail number to identify it. But it looks very, same sort of plane. Mm-hmm. And the colouring. So I include this in my presentation. So this is quite, again, the problem we have with this is, though, we've got the actual telemetry data showing that the plane was on the opposite side of the concourse. Now you get like a fixed offset when that they have to correct in a plane to do with the coordinates, so that they don't fly in the wrong position. You know what I mean? Like 1,500 feet to the left. They have to do it. They coincide with the runway, and when you line everything up, it does not coincide with the runway. Now that's the INS data. I think it's the I can't remember the acronym name. There's that many acronyms I have to remember, but again, it's all on the website. So so we've got that happening with 77. So that's quite.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So going back to the passengers, and you're able to identify who some of those folks are. What's the significance of that? Do we have proof that those people are still with us? Do we have proof that they perished? What's the significance of that?
Well, if I'm being honest, I don't know how they met their fate. But what's very strange is that you've got the telemetry data telling you a plane departed, pushed back from a gate on the opposite side of the concourse. You've also got a plane at D26 gate, the official gate, and you got some passengers going onto that plane. However, we've also got telemetry or database information from the BTS, Bureau of Transportation Statistics, saying that the plane never left the ground.
Gotcha.
And then we've got the radar, which was withheld and only come out under the Freedom of Information Act, which shows the plane didn't turn around and flew on to Missouri, over into Kansas, and then disappears off radar. So, again, we've got a lot of conflicting official, and that's official data, which does not paint the picture of, how the passage. Now, I don't know anybody who's met those passengers, or if they've disappeared them, or if there was that, just personas, in an operation northwards, perhaps. But
right.
I have studied the exercises, and I have got a document that details an exercise on 9/11, which is, I think it was carried out over in Washington. And they had, when they do these exercises, you have calling cards, you have pretend witnesses, they have props to,
Right.
they can insert.
They're quite elaborate.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Now, just to pick up on some of the chitter-chatter on the recordings, when they ask about, is this real world or an exercise?
Yes.
What people take real world to mean is in, like, our real world. But in military terms, I've come across evidence that real world means actually a live military training simulation.
Right.
Exercise.
Not necessarily in like a technological simulator.
Like something happening organically.
In real life.
Yeah.
All right.
When they talk about real world.
Interesting.
This is why you've got one of the operators who, when they said a plane's gone into the towers, she says, cool. Oh, cool. I mean, I can't comprehend somebody saying cool when something like that happens. And you've got, I think it was Major Nassifani, that when allegedly Flight 11 goes into the tower, the first plane, he thinks they've started the exercise too early, an hour too early, which is going to tie into something I'm going to mention a bit down the line, which is, again, very, very shady evidence, which I come to learn about. So these exercises could have been really embedded in what we're looking at with a lot of this conflicting evidence.
Right.
Now, are you aware of Amalgam Virgo 02? Not 01, 02?
No.
I don't think so. It's not familiar to me.
Okay, well, that was an exercise that was planned for June 2002, and they were going to use real Delta Airlines employees, have FBI agents as hijackers, and they were going to run a simulation that was of a hijacked, very similar hijack scenario. And we've also got evidence that I think it may have been on the 31st of August 2001, one of the exercises that they were running, they were using simulated cell phone calls. And that's documented.
Simulated cell phone calls from the plane?
Yeah. Part of an exercise.
That's always been one of the things that made me scratch my head the most. It is 2024, and I cannot take my cell phone on that plane and call anybody from it. And I know that, particularly with United Flight 93, where everyone was calling home and whatnot, there was one guy, I forgot his name off the top of my head, but I was just literally listening to the radio transmission the other day, and they said he had a satellite phone on the plane, and it just struck me as odd that any civilian would ever have a satellite phone.
Yeah.
Even in the early 2000s, again, I'm going to say late 90s, because that's the era of technology we were in.
Yeah.
A cell phone at that time was not like the cell phones we necessarily have today. They were much bigger, much bulkier, and they definitely didn't work. And they don't work today. And so that's always, being on a flight and like thinking of all these scenarios, I've often thought, if we were going down, I would send my texts. That way, by the time we got low enough or whatnot, maybe the phone would send it afterwards.
Yeah.
But the voice communication to me has always been a really big point of contention on all of these flights.
Yeah.
And even the whole movie of United 93, right? Like there was a movie about it, and there's pretty good chronicles on, what happened on it. How do you know? And I understand the movie took its own liberties, but the chronicles that we've seen written on the official narrative, they've described everything that happened. And I don't know that you can get that out of a single phone call. Put that aside. Maybe one person had a satellite phone. How are there multiple calls off there? People aren't walking around with satellite phones, and they're still probably not working that well. So that's always been something that's bothered me. The idea of that being simulated in advance.
Yeah.
Well, now that starts to make a little bit more sense.
Well, again, simulation can mean part of an exercise. So if you look at Betty Young.
Correct.
Now, I'm very respectful because he's like you ran with at the start about respect for the families and that. This is very, very sensitive areas when you're talking about this. So, you have to have sensitivity. Now, it's not out the realms that Betty Young could have been part of an exercise taking place where one of the Flight 11s went up with no passengers on, just crew, which was part of an exercise. I'm sort of leading to what I have come to from the evidence, and I'll go over this quickly before I come to 93, because there's a pile of evidence with 93, which is even more than the other flight, actually. So, if you imagine that Betty Young were, there was, are you aware of Betty Young saying she was on Flight 12?
I have heard of that, yes.
Yeah. And Amy Sweeney said the same. She was on Flight 12, and they say it twice, which is bizarre. That was the return flight that they would have been getting to come back if they'd have made it to their destination. They'd have been coming back on Flight 12. So was it through stress that she said that? But there's some interesting things. There's a lot omitted from that phone call. They won't let you hear the whole phone call, which I find, again, it's an absence of evidence, but again,
unusual.
Yeah, we can say, well, if you've got nothing to hide, let's hear that. Always
the case.
Yeah. So, but there is some strange things on that with Betty Young, because you're not getting any. If she rang from the airphone, she rang reservations. Now, I find that strange that she rang reservations, but if she did, it was coming from the airphone. So it's possible that would have got through. It wasn't a cell phone, it was from the airphone. Now, I'm going to tell you about a really important witness, which leads me to why I think that one of the Flight 11s was an exercise scenario happening. And that is there was a cleaner named Wayne Kirk who was on Flight 11 cleaning it, and he left the plane between 7 and 7:30, and he said there was only 2 crew people there, which was highly unusual, or he said it was odd. They should have been gathering for their duties to be attending to that plane. And we know from we're told that passengers started boarding that plane around 7:30. Now, if he left between 7 and 7:30, you would think that there'd be more crew there tending to things for that flight, on their duties, but there wasn't. He said there was only 2, which was unusual, which leads me to believe that perhaps that plane was part of an exercise, which is why it was still airborne.
Right.
And heading to Washington. Now, I don't know whether you're aware of some reports in Washington and there was only 2 reports of this, that the Secret Service rang the fire department and said a plane had crashed into the White House. This come from the Secret Service. Now...
Yeah, I do recall hearing that.
Yeah, well, we know the Secret Service in the past have run scenarios of training of planes going into the White House. The interesting thing with this report is the fire department was sent out as well with a structural team in case the building was unsafe. And when they all got there, everything was fine. So, which makes me question, was the Secret Service running an exercise of a plane crashing into the White House. It's very possible they could have been doing that to make such a phone call at 9.
Sure.
I think it was something like 9:40 or something, or before, off the top of my head, and to have a structural team sent out as well. So that is very, very strange.
It's very strange.
Now, was Flight 11 taking part in that exercise? And was that why it was over heading towards Washington? You know, for 9:40, which it ties in with the time perfectly, to be honest. Now, if it had been over there, are you aware where Reagan National Airport is compared to the White House and the Pentagon?
Not exactly. I'm not without seeing it on the map. No.
It's about a mile from the Pentagon.
Okay.
And
it's right there.
It's very close.
Yeah. And if Flight 11 was coming down where we were told, it would have been passing by the White House to land at Reagan. Now, Reagan's a very key airport, a very secure airport. Again, something that a lot of people don't know, Reagan National Airport closed for 23 days. The only airport to do that on 9/11.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think there was a threat that it might not ever open again. Now, that aroused my suspicions with Reagan, because it's it's in the military area.
Right.
You get what I mean? It's controlled airspace. You can't just fly around there. So that made me very suspicious with this, again, the no wheels off time, Flight 11 still being airborne, and these reports, with the Secret Service of a plane going into the White House.
Do you think those Secret Service reports could have just been a mistake and said the White House over the Pentagon? I mean, it sounds like the timing kind of adds up.
Yeah. Well,
is it possible?
It's possible, but I think it was after the Pentagon. I'm sure it was at 9:46, which sort of ties into Major Nasifany's his thoughts when he said the exercises weren't meant to start for another hour. Which would have been 9:46, if you get what I mean. Right. When he said Flight 11 hit the towers, allegedly hit the towers, it's then you've got at 9:46 is an hour later from that happening. So, but Major Nasifany, I think his name is, he actually, he's the one who, I think, designed some of these exercises. So, as well, so that's Flight 11. That's my theories on Flight 11.
Well, so I want to lean into that a little bit more too, because we talked a little earlier about a hologram and going back to the towers now. If a hologram is now projected to show a plane hitting the towers, what actually hits it? Is it wrapped around a missile? Is it something else entirely? Was it a controlled demolition from start to finish? What do you think actually caused the destruction in the towers and then subsequently in the Pentagon?
Right, well, a plane doesn't make a plane-shaped hole, nor do missiles make a plane-shaped hole. So there's something else at play now. The seismic evidence to do with the North Tower that actually shook that tower for 12 seconds, which is longer than when the towers. I'm not going to use the word collapsed, because I don't believe they collapsed in that fashion.
Down,
They turned to dust somehow.
Sure.
So we've got a problem there. Like I say, a missile does not cause a big plane-shaped hole, and one of those planes wouldn't cause a plane-shaped hole. A tail section certainly wouldn't slice through and cause a tail section in one of them towers, and the wings would not slice through. I know there's people who say it would have been like a cheese, going through like a cheese, but you would expect some debris to fall to the ground, and I've got some very, very close-up photographs, not video, and you do not see plane parts falling to the ground.
Right.
So it goes straight in. Now, I don't know whether I might have to head back onto my other slide, so I'll just get off this.
So you're not really making a claim on anything. You just don't think the planes were involved. That's where you're coming from, basically.
I'm gonna put forward something which I'm trying to look at this logically as well. So I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, of course. No, I appreciate that. And that's the whole thing about this is there's so many aspects of all of this, the whole thing from top to bottom, that it's hard to like say, because of course this is the age of the internet where you say one thing and everyone holds you to it, and you can be right about 99% of the things. The one thing you're wrong about, everyone latches onto that, and it's like, well, you were wrong. You can't be right about anything else. So I appreciate that. We take this in baby steps. What I've tried to do with this is try and present some evidence, really, and do the telemetry data to show. If you're going to say to somebody, look, no planes hit the towers, they're not. Then average Joe is going to go, what are you talking about? We've seen the planes.
Right. I know this guy's a kook.
Yeah. So what I've tried to do is, and I haven't got onto Flight 93 yet, which is even more, worse than the others, I think, is I've tried to show that these planes are still airborne. There's evidence for that they wasn't at where the four, there was nowhere near the four targets that they were attributed to crashing into, and we have no ELTs to prove that they crashed into those targets. So, that's pretty conclusive evidence on top of everything else, if you get what I mean. So then you get the question is, well, what, like you've asked, what did it? So, are you aware? I'll just get down, slide a little bit. So, can you see this picture?
Yeah.
Right,
and this is something that's come up quite a bit in a lot of our other research, a lot of other discussions, is the just that magnetic interference, I guess. The seismic data. Yeah.
Are you aware of of this, which is the Earth's magnetic field fluctuations on 9/11? During 9/11, the actual event.
Familiar with it.
I'm excited to learn about it.
Okay, so this come about from Dr. Judy Wood. She did quite extensive investigation, and one of the areas she looked into was the Earth's magnetic field. So she noticed that when both the towers got their, I'll say, plane holes, that there was disruption in the Earth's magnetic field. And I've just done a bit of a close-up. You can see quite a bit of a dip there at 8:46. It disrupts, and then we've got, if you go back to this one, it starts disrupting all the way through the event, right the way up to when Building 7 goes away, if you want to use that term.
Sure.
So we've got these fluctuations, and we've got the same for the Pentagon. We've got this dip, and they all correspond. It's a bit hard to see the lines. I might have to just blow that up. You get the dip up, and you've got that dip down. So you can see this corresponding dip, and they're all dipping on that one. And then I'll just move on to the next. And then at 10, I've got two times on here, and there's a good reason for this. You've got 10:03 a.m., which is the official time Flight 93 crashed. Again, you've got this fluctuation going up, and then you got a dip at 10:06. Now, there's an issue with Flight 93 because the seismic evidence shows that Flight 93 crashed at 10:06, allegedly crashed at 10:06, was when that hole happened with the seismic signal, and not 10:03. Now, they lent on the seismologists to try and get them to fall in line with the 10:03 for some reason. And there's lots of reports of 10:06, but the seismic data shows it was 10:06. And as I was saying with Flight 11, when that impacted the towers, it actually caused a seismic signature reading of 12 seconds, which is longer than the seismic reading for 500,000 tonnes the building falling to the ground, which is kind of strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, carry on.
What would cause this? What are some theories?
Well, some would say it's a signature of directed energy weaponry.
Which is what we've heard.
Yeah.
Some theories surrounding specifically the Pentagon.
Yeah. There's quite a bit of evidence for the Pentagon as well. I mean, Dr. Judy Wood did put a lot of evidence to do with the towers in her book, Where Did the Towers Go?, which was quite compelling. You had these 1,400 cars which were toasted, and there wasn't even anywhere near the Twin Towers. I think there was something like a quarter of a mile away.
Wow.
Yet you've got them okay 1 minute, and then the next minute they're all what they call toasted. Engine blocks have turned to dust, disappeared. Paper survives. So this could have been something along them lines of a directed energy, but something interfered with the Earth's magnetic field, which plane crashes don't do.
Sure. And I'll risk a stupid question. That's okay.
No, that's fine.
When we're talking about the Earth's magnetic field, are we talking about in one specific location of the Earth, or are we talking about like the whole Earth?
Well, I think it was up in, I can't remember which station this was recorded because there's such a lot of information. But it was recorded, I don't know if it was at several stations or a particular station. It might have been up in Alaska. I'd have to double check that. But it's in Where Did the Towers Go book.
Gotcha.
And Dr. Judy Wood covers that quite in some depth and the significance of it. Probably, much better than I can because she's a lot more,
She's the expert on it, right?
Yeah, she collected thousands of photographs and she's presented a lot of very, very strange anomalies that you wouldn't get with a plane crash, that you wouldn't get with a collapse. I mean, just to mention, people ignore that you had two 500,000 ton buildings that fell to the ground and only caused a 2.1 and a 2.3 seismic signature, and they didn't have what they call an S and the P wave in. Now, if you had a controlled demolition, you would have had the S and the S wave or the P wave in there.
Right.
You do not get that. So it's the equivalent of, if you imagine sitting on your bed and when you get up off the bed, the bed sort of comes back.
Sure.
That's what was sort of happening. It's the equivalent to the ground moving back up rather than something falling and to it and causing a kinetic, rumble through that ground.
Right.
That's the only best way I can sort of explain that, why you've got the absence of the P waves in that sort of fashion. Yeah. If it had been a controlled demolition, you would have definitely had the P waves, and it never went below ground level. That's the other thing when the building, turned to dust. So it's as if something was turning it to dust from the top down, and you had probably, I would estimate probably 85 to 90% of the building was turned to dust, and just the lower part is what actually was left to fall. Because they'd have ruptured that bathtub that they were built in, the dike, what was holding back the Hudson. There was a good chance that them buildings would have, would have been flooded out because of 500,000 tonnes causing a lot more damage, shall I say. There's some minor damage, I think, where that to use some tying it back. But it wasn't significant enough to, completely flood the place. Which is what I think would have happened if those buildings would have collapsed how they said. And you have, there's lots of strange effects with that as well. Paper survived as well. You had some people who survived in the stairwell who walked out. It seemed like walking out on a football pitch. The rubble pile is non-existent really. So it's very strange.
It's funny you mentioned paper. On that day, I actually happened to be homesick from school, and I don't know why. I mean, I was 14 years old. I don't know why I would have had the news on, but for whatever reason, the news was on. And I remember seeing what looked like snow at first, and I'm like, okay, we have reports of a plane hitting the World Trade Center, and why does it look like it's snowing? And what it was paper. There was paper or just all over the place. So it's ironic that you bring up the paper thing.
Yeah. I mean, just going back to this slide with whatever this is that hit. I mean, that looks nothing like. You can see this slide, can you? What I brought back up. Yeah, that there is not a Boeing 767. Now, this chap here named Les Sweeting, he explains on this video.
But when we came down here, I see a rocket going.
He said he saw a rocket.
Just watch the rocket drive straight
like a rocket. He explained it as a rocket. You know, he instinctively said the second one hit the building was a rocket, which is very similar to what you'd think if you've seen a glimpse of that. And a lot of people said a small plane hit. You know, and again, it was covered up by the FBI in a report about a Cessna hitting the towers. Now, I believe that a lot of people who think they saw a small plane, if you look at this picture here, what's there, you could quite innocently think, of a blink of something travelling at 500 and, 86 mile an hour or something. That could be a small plane or a rocket or a missile. You could believe that, So I think there was a lot of misidentification because whatever that 3D volumetric technology that they were using wasn't quite perfect back on 9/11, and there was a lot of interference, which I think would have been caused with that technology because of, like I say, to do with the Earth's magnetic field being interfered with, and I don't think they would have took that quite into account. Which is why I think you only ever really got to see the second plane on television, and no news did a real close up. None of them was on the ground. If there was, they'd never shown it. So we only ever had coverage of really the one plane, didn't we?
Right.
So I want to pivot us a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because there's one question I don't think we really can come up with an answer for yet, and that's Flight 93, United Flight 93. And you talked about that throughout the duration of today, kind of teasing us a little bit about it. With the planes that hit the Pentagon and the planes that hit the World Trade Center, supposedly. Yeah. I think you can write off a lot of the crew. There's no way, they're all perished, they're gone. But 93 is unique because it didn't strike any landmark at all. It crashed, and the narrative around that is that it crashed because the passengers rose up, they fought off the terrorists, and they just basically couldn't steer the plane in themselves, and ended up crashing right here. With all the data you've shown us today, that narrative kind of comes into question. That one I can paint as a true one too, prior to today. But with all the different data we've seen, the inconsistencies, and 93 seems to be looped into that as well. Yeah. So what happens on 93? If it doesn't hit a target, it just lands in the middle of nowhere. Is there a reason? Or is there something more that we're missing?
Well, I'll just go back. We're told Flight 93 took off at 8:42 a.m. That's what we're told officially. Again, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics show it took off at 8:28, not at 8:42. So again, we've got this conflict. So this is where it starts to get a bit murky with things. So I'll push on. Can you see the slides okay? Yeah. Yep. Okay. I'll just get that there. So there we go. So we're told, if we look at again what I've just mentioned there, that Flight 93 took off, and it was not going to plan with the official story. So at 8:42, we're told it took off. It actually took off at 8:28 according to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. Now, we do have an eyewitness named Triton White who was a football player back in his day, who was on the tarmac, and he was informed. I'm just going to see if I can get this up. He was informed that the flight, he's seen some passengers being loaded onto a plane, and he was informed that was flight 93. Because they would have come back, they'd have the Monday night football, he'd come back on the Tuesday, or they come back and they get the VIP treatment of how they get off the plane and stuff. And he was told that when he observed passengers getting onto a plane on the tarmac, that was flight 93. Now, are you aware of Mark Bingham, a passenger?
I have heard of that name. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's admitted in the official documents that Mark Bingham was not assigned a seat on flight 93. So
was he not on the manifest?
He was not on the manifest either.
Wow.
Isn't he the one, for those that are listening and don't necessarily know who we're talking about, he's the one that was sort of championing the revolt on the plane and eventually tackles the terrorists or tries to take them down? Am I thinking of the same person?
Yeah. Okay. I'll just explain this because it's quite interesting, because not a lot of people know this. Going back to the phone calls, so he rang his mother, didn't he? Alice Hoglan was her name then.
Yep.
For some reason, she changed the name to Hoagland. I've still not got to the bottom of that yet, whether it was through marriage or something else. But Mark Bingham's name is put on a memorial as Gerald Mark Bingham. Now, I know his dad's name was Jerry or Gerald, but I find it highly strange why they've referred to him that way, and it's not just on that headstone or that memorial stone that's built for him. There's other places where he's referred to as Gerald Mark Bingham, but Mark Bingham's name officially is Mark Kendall Bingham. Now, Alice, his mother, was a flight attendant for United Airlines as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So they tried to, in this report that I've read, she tries to say, to offer an explanation why his name is not assigned to a seat on the flight, because he was travelling on her pass, employee pass.
Interesting.
But this doesn't hold water for me, because when you fly that manifest, you have to account for everybody on there,
right?
And he's not accounted for on them early version of the manifest. He's not on there, and there's no way they'd close that door without assigning him a seat, whether it's in business, economy, wherever. He would be on there. So this is highly strange why he's doesn't show up on that flight. Now, apparently, according to Mark Hall, who was, I think, Mark Bingham's partner, or going to be his partner, he dropped him off, and I think he was running late, and Mark Bingham was running to get the plane. And now, I know things were very different in America then for getting a plane. I think it was a lot more loose, wasn't it? It was probably like getting a train,
right.
you know. But that being said, there's no way that his name would not be accounted for in the flight manifest.
Was Alice's name on the manifest?
No.
No? Okay.
I don't want to be insensitive, but I have to raise this point because because I find it hard. I've studied psychology, which I never mentioned at the start, so I'm very familiar with how people present with grief and things like that. Now, again, I'm being sensitive, but I found her presentation when she's done interviews, on I think it was the day after. It didn't. It felt a bit off for me. Now, she can't.
Not like somebody who should be grieving a son that they just lost.
Yeah, and she's smiling, and the whole presentation felt very scripted and very forced. Now, Alice, I'll say Hoagland, she's no longer with us, so I don't want to be pointing fingers like that, really, because she's no longer with us and she can't answer back. And I'm not that type of person to do that, but I have to point out what she's her presentation. And I'm not saying she's lying, perhaps that's just how she presents. It could be. But I personally, and a lot of other people, found it highly strange. And then if you've got all this going on with Mark Bingham not being assigned a seat and not showing up on the manifest, and she's a United Airlines employee. Now, I know that they do use employees for exercises. But, again, what do we make of that? It's difficult to...
At that era, I don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibility that Mark used his mother's status, because that's common, to get on the flight for free, to fly free. I don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibility that it was last minute and that maybe she called in a favor to the pilot and said, hey, can you let my son sneak on the plane? Because to your point before, is like airports in America at that point, you could go right up to the gate. You really didn't have to go through like 75 layers of security, and now you can't do that at all. But then people... You see the old films and stuff, not even that old films. You see films from the 2000s. People were standing outside the gates when people got off. That doesn't happen at all. Hasn't happened in most of my flying years. But then it wasn't like that. So is it out of the realm of possibility? No. I think it's unlikely. There's going to have to be some accountability somewhere, especially, God forbid, something happens, which of course it did. I don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibility. Again, being very young at that point, I was a sophomore in high school or something like that, or maybe junior. I can't remember, but my flight experience wasn't much to that degree at that point. I don't even think it was at all. It's question marks around it. I wouldn't say yes or no either direction. It's a hard one to digest.
Which is why I tend to just point these things out, if you get what I mean. Things that appear. I think with the presentation, the way she was, doesn't help the earlier points that with that, which is
people deal with grief in different ways for sure, but it is unique. I think to like another story, completely off the topic of 9/11, but there was a disappearance of a young girl named Madeleine McCann, out over, I think it's in Portugal. And this will be a great conspiracy theorist episode with you and me, Tim, later down the line. But the whole crutch of it, the point I was trying to make is that her parents seemed very calm in all of their appearances post the loss of their child. Again, people deal with grief in very, very different ways. There's a video most recently of a shooting going on in school where a teacher's like laughing. It's a nervous laughter. But I think after you've been able to step out and digest it, I've lost both parents, right? So I've went through those emotions. I think it becomes very difficult to present yourself in front of an audience and maintain complete composure. I maintained my composure at both of their funerals. No issues at all. Most people had commented like, oh, I'm surprised you're not like more broken down. And you go through a mental process of like isolating it. I totally get that. So again, maybe that's not the total tell, but to be laughing and giggling, if I was with friends, I'd use that opportunity to kind of decompress a little bit. But in front of the public, I think, especially given the circumstance of 9/11, where like at the time you're dealing with what you assume is a terrorist attack. This isn't like, this isn't nothing. And so I'd be inclined to think that your composure would be a little less maintained. My 2 cents on that. But again, like you said, it's hard to throw stones at somebody that's not around to defend themselves, just observationally. It's an
observation. But something else, there's another account, which again is in the official account, of a fueler called Anthony Mazza. and he fueled. He's a fueling technician, and he fueled United 93. Now, after he'd fueled it and he got onto the plane to exchange the slips of paper that they do or get something signed, he later seen a special where they were showing the pilots on Flight 93, and he didn't recognise the pilot or the co-pilot who he handed the paper to. It was somebody totally different. Now, the guy he handed the paper to, now Leroy Homer, is a man of colour. The person he handed it to was not, and it was not the other pilot. I think was it Jason Dahl, I think, and he didn't recognise him either. And he got it sounds like he got in touch with the FBI to clarify that,
right,
after watching this memorial. So this is like this strange encounter he had, this fueler, on the plane, and didn't recognise the co-pilot, the named co-pilot that we were told. Now this again ties into was the two planes, because we have the BTS saying 8:28 the plane took off. We have the official one, which is 8:42. Now this is where it goes completely off the rails. Now I'll get back onto this, and I'll go through it quickly for you. So
sure,
I'll just share that screen again. Back onto that. That's the one, I think. Yeah. So we've got the ACARS data, right? So this started pinging. So we have flight. I've not included all of them, by the way, because I'd be here forever. But all these little squares are ground stations for the ACARS routing. So what you have is Flight 93 took off here, and apparently it done this U-turn near Cleveland, quite close to Delta 1989 there, and it turned round and then it allegedly crashed in Shanksville. However, at the time of the crash, I mean, it was pinging ACARS messages here, and over here. Now, over here is Champaign, Illinois. Now, this message was received at 11 minutes past 10. And as we know, that we're told Flight 93 crashed at 10:03. Now, Champaign, Illinois, I think that's probably roughly about 500 miles away from Shanksville. Now, the radius of them ground stations is probably 200 or 300 miles at best. So, why is the plane over here being picked up and pinging with these, being routed through the messages? You see, that's sort of indicating that it did not make the turn. But as you'll find out, this gets even weirder with this, because it's quite damning even more. So, just to back up with the Champaign, Illinois, which is near Chicago, we've got a report. Now, this is commission sensitive material. We've got Colonel Marr, and he said his staff that the focus is on United 93, which was circling over Chicago. Which sort of ties in with the last ACARS over here Chicago's here, and you got Champaign, Illinois, so it could be between these two radiuses around here. So what was United 93 doing circling round Chicago? And we've got Colonel Marr on record backing that up, you see.
It certainly does not fit with the official narrative.
It does not fit with the official narrative. Then,
and consistent across all four planes too, right?
It's
they all appear in different areas. They're all pinging different. Yes, right.
Then we have this news report at 11 minutes, at 10 past 11 in the morning, saying that United 93 originated in Chicago and flew to Cleveland. Now, this could be an erroneous report, but I find it strange how they're saying that it was in Chicago and flew to Cleveland. Did they pick? Was there a report of 93 circling and then heading to Cleveland? Which there was some reports that they said that Flight 93 possibly did land at Cleveland. So again, I'm reading between the lines of that, but I've found that very interesting, that report. You see, but being as we have two pieces, of telemetry data, showing Flight 93 over near Chicago. So again, that's very damning.
Yeah. That just doesn't make sense. I think I mentioned this earlier, right? The question surrounding this day, 9/11, that I really gravitated to was inside job, controlled demolition, or some other source that kind of brought those buildings down. But it's really, I never thought about the plane thing. And when, I gotta be honest, initially, when I first discovered this in your work, I was like, dude, I saw planes hit the building, man. Like, I know it was planes.
Yeah.
But it's so difficult to dispute this evidence. Maybe there's somebody out there that knows much more about it that could explain it to me or you or anybody, and I'd go, oh shit, okay, well that's it, right? But as we're sitting here right now, it's really difficult for me to come up with some other solution. It's very damning evidence, and I find it very bizarre.
I mean,
it's hard to argue fact. It's hard to argue evidence like this, like tangible, publicly released data. It's very hard to argue data.
Yeah. And the thing is, I have been in contact with some pilots, and I'm not blowing my trumpet. Some of them don't. It's as if they don't understand some of that data, like ACARs.
Sure.
And I've spent a long time looking into this. I know sometimes I can't recall stuff off the top of my head because I've done I've got a lot of information in my filing cabinet in my head.
Sure.
And sometimes I'm recalling it, and I've been putting things together.
Yep.
So
we were just talking about that Mandela effects, right?
Yeah, it's slightly difficult. Now we're going to get onto something even strange, which I think sort of backs up the duplicate plane evidence. And I say evidence because we're dealing with two pieces of evidence here, even very strong evidence as well, which you'll find quite interesting and very revealing about where possibly Flight 93 landed. So the other strange anomaly we got is the air traffic control. Now this is different to the ACARs. This is air traffic control. This is who are in contact with the plane, through voice, telling them to move into different areas. Mm-hmm. Their last coordinates placed Flight 93 15 miles past the crash site in Shanksville, proving that the plane hadn't crashed. So I'm just going to find this and bring it up. So there we go. I'll just enlarge that for you. So when you put the coordinates in for Flight 93, what they give on the air traffic control transcripts, and you can also hear this on radio as well, recordings. When you put the coordinates in, it places, so we got the crash site there, it places the official coordinates place Flight 93 15 miles past the crash site and heading to Washington, which was one of the things they put out, wasn't it? They said, it's heading for the White House, which I find a bit coincidental considering what that reporter told you about earlier.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
and now this was, do we have a time on this?
Yeah, this would have been after the crash.
So this was post when it should have crashed in Shanksville.
Here we go. So take into account the universal time. So this is the transcripts here.
Sure.
And at 14:11, which means 11:10.
Yep.
It's got last reported position. Now this is actually reported at this time, if you get what I mean. So there will be a delay, as in like if they noticed it at 10:03 or 10:10, then they're reporting it on the chitter chatter of the air traffic control at 14:11, which is 11:10. So
Sure.
it gives you the precise coordinates there, look. And that, again, this is official evidence. You know, it's not my opinion or, you know. So
Sure.
in that place, is it 15 miles past the crash site when you put the coordinates in?
That's crazy.
Now, the other thing is we've got more official evidence, which is to do with Linda Justice. She states that in the communication recordings that Flight 93 was flashing over Hagerstown, which is 69 miles past the crash site in Shanksville. So we're building a picture here of a flight path.
Yeah.
Of where
Hagerstown is in, I believe, Maryland.
Yeah.
Yep.
The recording is being prepared by the Cleveland Air Route Traffic Control Center. The subject concerns aircraft accident involving United 93 on September 11th, 2001 at approximately 1403 Coordinated Universal Time. I hereby certify the following as a true recording of the original recorded transmissions pertaining to the subject aircraft accident. My name is Garrett O'Connor. I'm employed as an operations specialist at the Cleveland Air Route Traffic Control Center. This portion of the re-recording concerns the communications at the Imperial Radar Associate Position during the period 1355 Coordinated Universal Time to 1416 Coordinated Universal Time on September 11th, 2001.
All right, because he is, well, he's not, part of the problem is he's got his transponder turned off. Imperial. Northwest 1271, you're cleared to Pittsburgh via continue the turn direct to
32-2 for everything there, Imperial.
And expect direct to, I tell you what, I'm going to take you over Bel Air just to avoid that other aircraft. Northwest 1271, just clear direct Bel Air, direct Whiskey, direct Pittsburgh.
You need a 10.
That's Bel Air, Whiskey, and Pittsburgh, Northwest 1271. That's correct, sir. Bel Air is just due west from that point.
Allegheny 6, Heavy High.
United 1854. I tell you what, we're going to go to Pittsburgh. Clear direct Cutta, direct Pittsburgh.
I understand Pittsburgh, direct Cutta, direct Pittsburgh, United 1854.
That's correct. That's because that's just closer because that's the direction you're heading. Descend and maintain flight level 240.
Descend to 240, United 1854.
This is the
1854, we went Cutta, Pittsburgh. We've got to get him in on the ground faster than going back to Cleveland. So he went to Cutta Pitt.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Northwest 1271, India altitude, maintain flight level 250.
West 1271, leveling 50. We're going to miss it by a couple hundred feet.
Okay. Hey, United 1851, how good a rate of descent can you give me? United 1854, descend now, maintain flight level 240, expedite down.
Out of 29 for 240, expediting, United 1854.
Morgantown 75.
United 1854, just turn right to Pittsburgh, we may spiral you down.
So there's, I'll put this on the map as well. So there's the official crash site and there's Hagerstown. So we can see which direction it's heading in. And it's 69 miles past the crash site.
Wow.
So again, more. Yeah, how can we have two planes in two different places?
It's
Are you aware?
It's such a different turn than what I expected, you know?
Yeah. Are you aware they changed its flight plan to Reagan National Airport? Which is
I remember hearing that, yes.
Yeah.
I never really delved much into that, but yes, I do remember hearing that.
Well, Flight 93 had a change of flight plan now. You got conflicting things in the official documents where they said it was the pilot, came from the pilot to do the flight plan change, which would have mean it would have come from one of the hijackers. Then you got it saying, no, the hijackers never did it. So it was tried to be played down in the official official documents, and then they sort of reveal that it was changed, and they're doing like this bit of a dance. I don't think they knew whether they was coming or going.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Then we have this clip which was shown at 5 o'clock.
and then disappeared off the radar screens right here outside of the Pittsburgh area, a place called Shanksville. We don't know what happened there. What's kind of odd about this one, Joey, is that at some point after flying past Pittsburgh, the pilot apparently radioed and changed his destination to DCA, which is Ronald Reagan National Airport. Unclear what that means. Now let me just kind of put this all onto one graphic, if you.
And it shows the flight plan change for a destination to DCA, which is down here, which is Reagan National Airport. Right. So we've got again the evidence of. Let's see if I can get past that. Yeah, and that was reported in various mainstream media. So there's another one. To lend further weight to it, we've got this screenshot from FlightAware, which confirms that Flight 93 or United 93 landed at 10:28 at Reagan National Airport. And then we get even more evidence of this. So I'll just find that. This come from a spreadsheet, an Excel, which was under a Freedom of Information Act, and it shows that Flight 93 landed there at DCA at 10:28.
So as we look at this, I mean, I think at this point, and I think Tim would agree with me that from a tangible evidence standpoint, from a tangible logs and all of like the 3-letter agencies that are distributing this information, to me it's virtually undisputed at this point that something else was happening with these planes. Whether or not those were the planes that were involved in anything here, I guess you can continue to speculate, but the planes that were supposed to have taken off from their individual airports, we don't know what happened to them. My question, I guess, though, comes down to the same thing I asked you in the very beginning, and I want to pose it to you now as we went through all this data. And if you speculate, that's perfectly fine. What about the people? Where were all of these people that supposedly got on these planes, and what happens to them? Or were they all just make-believe people that maybe worked for the government and assumed an identity for the sake of saying that they got on that manifest? I mean, I don't doubt that the manifests were made up, right? I certainly don't doubt that. But before we even started, I pulled up a couple random names. Bingham was one of them, obviously. Interestingly enough, there's a Deborah Bingham, not to be confused with Mark, that was on 77. Patricia McGowan, Barbara Aresti, David Angel, Christine Lee. There are other names that have had family members that have been very vocal since 9/11. Are these just sort of psyops by the government, or were there really people that were maybe taken into custody, given new names, or just off at the head once they became collateral damage? What do you think?
Well, if you look at Operation Northwoods, they did talk about fictional characters and personas, you know, being involved with that type of operation. So it's not past their thinking of what they would like to have done with that Cuba operation to draw Cuba into a conflict and shooting down the plane. So that it's not beyond that, in my opinion. Proving it is more difficult, but the oddities with the passengers is. I mean, I want, out the 3 airports, and I know there's some controversy over the Dulles CCTV, whether that's authentic, but I have seen, which I've got in that other presentation, there's passengers who I've identified in that CCTV that's not been seen at all, you see. And there was a number of tapes which were given to an investigator to do the FBI called Lisa Sullivan, and they're all documented from the different cameras, even from the day before. And you can identify on there Charles Burlingame, or what looks like him. You can identify the other pilot, which was David, I think it was Charles Boyce, I think his name was. There's Rennie May, a flight attendant. There's also Marie Ray Super, I think her name was, and she had her cat with her. Not many people know a cat was involved with Flight 77.
No.
Named Sammy, yeah. She put her cat through, which, I mean, I can probably, I've got a lot of still shots, of them. So, on this CCTV, you can actually identify about 18 people. Including those photographs I showed you of the school children, it's roughly about 18 passengers who you can see, and flight attendants who were getting the plane. Now, there is another account from one of, I can't remember, John Milton, I think his name was. He was a musician, lost his wife on Flight 77. He was shown, apparently, video of passengers boarding at the actual boarding gate to get onto the plane. Now, he says that. And I've got a short, brief clip of him saying that. Now, whether that video is authentic or not, again, he's open for debate. I know when you had Adam on, I think he thinks that there's perhaps some of that video is not authentic.
Sure.
But then it is strange how you've got Mary Ray Soper, who was dropped off, and we got a testimony from a friend who dropped her off, and she shows up on there, going through the screening area.
Right.
And we've got some other passengers, so that's a difficult one. But there is, there is a paper trail of the release of these videos, which I've got the document for, showing what was released, and then going through it, and you can see what passengers show up on there. Whether that's real is another story, or
sure,
because they didn't have a date and time on, which is strange. But I have apparently heard, when I've looked into it, that apparently you only get the date and time when you play back the video through the software. So,
interesting.
Again, I can't answer whether that's true or false. I would have thought, but again, we're talking 2001,
Right, sure. Yeah, so the technology is certainly different.
And Adam might have more to shed light on that, but I can say I've got videos from Dulles that's not been seen, and there are passengers getting on it which you can identify, and 2 pilots, and some flight attendants, and a cat in the box. Which nobody ever mentions the cat, do they? So I thought I'd bring that one to you. And the cat's name's Sammy.
As with most of these types of conspiracies, especially ones that are relevant to like our life today, I feel like I come in like I'm just on the precipice of knowing everything, and I'm going to leave having all the answers solved, and then I leave with so many more questions because there's so much more information to digest, and I feel like that's how it was again today. You mentioned several times today your website. Do you want to share that with us and our audience? We'll certainly put it in the details below, but I'd love to get people to direct there to see more of these clips, see more of this information on your site, since we've sucked up a ton of time today.
Yeah, there's a couple of areas where you can find me. I'm now on Substack, and I've gone under more specific rather than my name. I've gone under 9/11 Planes Research, and that's at Substack. So if you sort that out, you'll do a search, you'll find that. You also, my old blogs, which go back to 2013. There's my original one, which is mark-conlon.blogspot.com. So there's that one.
Okay.
And then I've got literally it's a mirrored version of it, which is 9/11 Planes Research .blogspot.com, whatever it is. Yeah, so if you look them up, there's that many things, and I've got my YouTube channel, although I'm restricted what I can post there. So, but I've got a BitChute
that's
channel.
Always the case.
You
got to get yourself on X, Twitter X, or Rumble. We're redundant across all of them that way, because YouTube does. We found after some of these 9/11 ones, actually after one we did one with Died Suddenly, and that got a little shadow banned. So be on everywhere. Yeah.
Well,
So that's good. I'm
certainly.
going
I
to
had
post
the
these links
same.
in our. You're the same.
I had the same. I had my original YouTube in 2007. I had the whole Google account terminated, which is quite rare.
No, doesn't
And that was
surprise me.
after I appeared on
does
Richard
not
D.
surprise me
Hall's
either.
show, you see. I'd been on Richard
Sure.
D. Hall's show with Andrew Johnson, exposing a part of the psyop to do with the video fakery, which was put out to lead people away from the technology. But the technology, if you look deep enough, you can find quite a lot about it, but they've took a lot down. That links
Sure.
that used to be available have completely gone.
That's what happens. Yep. Anytime you get onto something, that's usually the best tell that you're onto something good,
Right.
because it gets taken offline. The stuff that people think are so fringe and out of control, nobody ever bothers that because they're probably off base. But this was absolutely incredible. We have eaten up a ton of your day over there, but we cannot thank you enough for sitting and spending the time with us. This isn't going to be the last time. As we kind of digest all of this and go through it, I'm sure we're going to be pinging you to try to come back on and dive in a little bit more.
Thanks for having
to our
me on.
audience out there. Yeah, seriously.
Thank you.
I know we've been trying to make this work for a
Thank you,
while
Mark.
too. No, seriously, to our audience out there, please like and subscribe this. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to post all of Mark's contact details in our description below, so check that out. As you can see, he had tons of slides, and he's got tons more on his YouTube channel and his website. So there's a lot more to dive down into this. It's a fun rabbit hole, and hopefully one that we can kind of get to the bottom of soon. So
May I just put a call out to some people who've helped me in the
please
past?
do.
Yes, I'd like to thank
Yeah. Of course.
Andrew Johnson who checked the evidence. He's been very helpful to me in the early days as well. Richard D. Hall, who had me on his show, which got a lot of the earlier research out of done, which is a bit different to this research. And Norman, 9/11 revisionist, I'd like to thank him. I'd like to thank Matt at MES. He's been a really great help with some of the video stuff, and we've been trading things because he's interested in the planes now. And I'd also Adam, because Adam gave me a recommendation, so I'd like to thank him for that, and I hope he looks into that with the CCTV, Adam, because I think he's got a good team around him by the sound of it, so I'd like to thank him as well for recommending me.
Absolutely.
And
That's
check
excellent.
them all them people out.
I'm jotting down these as you go through. Expect some emails from me for those of you I haven't talked to yet. So, seriously, thank you again, and to our audience, until next time, we'll see you.